and cameras there as long as you stay in this general area.
Okay, yeah.
It's for archiving and live streaming purposes.
Yeah. Sure, yeah.
That is, but you're fine as long. Just don't stray too far that way or that way.
Yeah, that's fine.
Good to see you, Bob. How you doing? Good.
By the way, what time is that Real Future Society thing? It's Sunday the 25th at what time?
So that should be 7 o'clock?
That's at 7 p.m. that day?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And where is it again? I can look it up. I just see an announcements.
Well, yeah. It's like Cafe Express.
Cafe Express on North Lamar.
Yes. There's like a more 35th-ish.
Okay,
around there.
that area. Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. See, it's swinging. Keep downtown. Yeah. It's weird. I looked at it the first time I read it. Just thinking how I'm playing to build that thing with that ball or the water room or whatever. It was nice.
Just a crawl comes in. How's John doing?
Is it nice?
It's in the house today, I believe. Kyle and Sarah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the Rush UI group, Brian on it, and wrote it out in Schneider got here. He came back. Yeah. About a year or so. But yeah, he left. Sony came.
Hey, I don't know how to go back and forth here. Can you help me with that? Oh, it must. Okay, there we go.
He's out, yeah.
Is that working?
And then now it's
Well, no, it's working.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay.
I just need to see the mouse. I was like, this weird.
Okay, awesome. If you're all good, I'll do a couple brief announcements.
Yeah, sure.
Introduce you. And I'm gonna double check that they actually have our live stream going, so we may start a minute or two late. Oh, there it is. Okay, I think we're all hooked up. So is the live stream good? We're all ready to start it. Awesome. I think we solved the technical difficulties, so we're good. Let's see. Let me double check. Yeah, you can see the local chapter.
Hey, Anne, do you have anybody taking pictures?
No, that's fine.
Oh yeah, anybody who wants to take pictures of anybody who wants to take pictures as well. There's also a full video archive that will be available later as well.
That gets it out, or how does that?
Well, I mean, we're live streaming the talk, but it'll also be available to watch later on our website.
Small business entrepreneur.
Let's see. Alright, so it's about 7 here, so I'd say we can go ahead and get started. Alright, welcome everyone. This is the monthly meetup of EFF-Austin, a affiliate organization of the Electronic Frontier Foundation, a member of their Electronic Frontiers Alliance, and assisting them in the fight for digital freedom for the last 25-ish years or so. So welcome newcomers and welcome familiar faces. My name is Kevin Welch. I'm the current president of EFF-Austin. I generally start off each meetup with a sort of a brief announcement of things coming up, and I also turn it over to the community for announcements. So first of all, we on Sunday, June 25th, this month at 7 p.m. at Cafe Express, which is on North Lamar around 35th, the ATX, well, the CTX World Future Society, of which Anne, our speaker today, is a member, is going to be having a talk. And what is it all off the top of my head again, Anne? What are you guys speaking about then?
Cooperation, evolution of cooperation.
The evolution of cooperation. So for those of you interested in futures-related topics and learning more about the World Future Society, I suggest checking that event out. Let's see what else is coming up in the short term. Oh, also just a general announcement about the meetups in general. We're starting a tradition where after the talks conclude at the monthly meetups, we're going to sort of have an hour for drinks and camaraderie. So tonight, when the talk concludes, 8:30 to 9-ish, we will be reconvening at the Firehouse Lounge and Hostel, which is about a block away from here. So, come to me and you can join us over there and get to know us all a little better. There's also, for those of you who are new, we do these meetups once a month. We're going to have a great one coming up in July. I suggest you attend, sort of like we did in July last year. It's going to be a panel discussion in collaboration with Michael Garfield, who is the host of a popular podcast called Future Fossils. He's going to be taping an episode of his podcast that will double as our monthly meetup. You will have a panel of some interesting luminaries, including me and a couple other EFF-Austin board members and former board members, as well as a prof from UT. It should be an enlightening discussion, so I suggest making next month. It should be quite interesting. Let's see, is there anything else I need to update you guys on that's imminent? I think that's most of the most important stuff. As always, get with us if you're more interested in getting involved. We're currently doing post-mortem analysis on some of our work we did for the last legislative session, so this is a good time to see where things stand on that if you're more interested in the politics side. Finally, before I turn over to Anne here, is there any announcements from the community that people feel would be relevant to people who follow the digital civil liberties community, etc.? Shameless self-promotion is totally allowed, so if there's anything coming up you'd like to let everyone know about.
You said you're doing a post-mortem on the legislative side.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a format or is that formal? Or?
You can talk to me about that later. It's mostly internal discussion with the board and advisors, but if you're interested in knowing more about the legislative work we've been doing, well actually, Josh would be the one to talk about if you're more interested in the stuff we do legislatively. He runs our politics team. Josh, you just came in there.
See the effort.
Yes, so any announcements from the community, upcoming events, workshops, seminars, anything anybody'd like to let people know about? Nope. All right, in that case, I'm going to quit rambling and turn things over to Anne here. So our speaker this month is Anne Boysen. She is the founder of a website called After the Millennials, which is one of the major websites and groups that's doing research on the upcoming generational attitudes of Generation Z, which is the generation that is basically teenagers right now, and saying that makes me feel really old. But anyway, specifically Anne's going to talk to us about this generation's attitudes when it comes to a topic near and dear to all of our hearts, privacy. Specifically, what is their attitude towards it? There's a common prevailing sentiment, if you follow articles claiming to know what the next generation thinks about things, that they don't care about privacy because they were born into a world where it's hard to have privacy. Anne, from what I have talked to her about this topic, thinks that this thesis is flawed, and I think she's going to talk to us a little more about what her research indicates are the actual attitudes of privacy in this generation. So I'm going to turn things over to Andrew.
All right, thank you. Let's see if I deserve that applause. Anyway, I'm so glad to see so many people show up, and thank you so much for having me. I think this means that there's a pretty growing interest in what that might look like, that future where the next generation may embrace or not embrace are currently, diminishing privacy or control over our digital turf. So I've been to a lot of these different technology conferences where you'll have a panel session and then somebody throws on it. Well, the next generation doesn't really care about privacy anyway, so we might as well just go ahead and do A, B, C, which is typically compromising the integrity of the data that is increasingly surrounding our lives. Anyway, so I don't come from a technology background, I come from a social science background and a strategic foresight background. and I'm getting my second graduate degree in business analytics, which is using predictive models and data mining techniques to try to really get into the data and specifically looking at what are the emerging sentiments, and specifically from the younger generations. This is like, I'm talking about what I want to do, how I want to use my analysis in the future. I'm not really doing a whole lot of that right now. I'm doing surveys, like consumer surveys and more old-fashioned ways of getting into their heads. But I've done it for a long time. And so I think I'm starting to see some emerging sentiments and some emerging attitudes around this area. So I thought maybe I'll start talking about, I'm obviously not Generation Z myself, and I'm dating myself here, but I thought I might start with where I'm coming from in my childhood and kind of contrast that a little bit to my children's childhood. And so this is what my childhood looks like. Anybody here remember this from their childhood? Cool, good, okay. We're a bunch of zombies here, that's good. So, you know, one of the things that I want to touch on is that this thing here, that computer up there, you know, that's digital technology. So very often when you hear about Generation Z, you hear that they're the digital natives because they're using digital technology. Well, I'm a digital native because I had a Commodore 64. And you know, one of those, we all have these defining moments in our lives. And for me, it was, you know, when I knew enough Pascal code to change the font color from mint green to fuchsia, I was big. So obviously, very early encounters with the digital. So it's like, you know, it's not as much as this youngest generation. They're much more immersed into that digital life, obviously. But we can't really talk about digital nativity by defining it as being somebody who are using digital technology, which is very often the definition that you read. My understanding of digital nativity, again, if we're talking about Generation Z and call them digital natives, is the fact that the digital technology itself has can leverage so much change in their lives outside of the technology itself. That the digital technologies they're using become the conduits to a very different change in their non-technical lives. So it has a sort of an all-embracing 360-degree impact on them in their lives. And that actually gets me to my next point, an example of how a digital lifestyle is impacting your life is how the difference with how we took our photos. So here, graciously modeled by Will Ferrell. By the way, I didn't ask him to use this photo. So if you talk to him, it's all in good faith here. Anyway, so I can guarantee you one thing. That's one thing that's not going to change from one generation to another. Mothers and grandmothers will always try to take the most embarrassing photos, and they will try to share that photos with as many people as possible. That's just a fact of life. I'm pretty sure if you went back to the cave mothers and cave grandmothers, I'm pretty sure that they would kind of cut into the wall, you know, embarrassing moments of their kids, like, you know, oh, look at that, it's the first time he ran away from the snake, look at that expression on his face, you know, I mean, that's just part of being parents. You're always going to end up embarrassing your children. So the difference is that, you know, so grandma and mom would hang these pictures on the wall, typically against like a orange, yellow, brownish patterned wallpaper, but it was confined to that perimeter of her room, of her living room. So in many ways, your mom and my mom and our grandparents had more in common with the cave grandmothers than they have with me as a mother. And why is that? The reason for that is that that's my wall. These are my kids and that's my wall. And the thing is, I can scale my children's digital footprint to a whole world. And this is the first generation that has been possible to do that. Obviously, and I have privacy settings on my Facebook. Not everybody has that. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about how parents are cultivating their children's digital footprint. But this is just, instead of saying that, oh, this is good, this is bad, it's different. It's very different. When your wall is basically a digital wall that can scale everywhere. This is, but there's good opportunities too. So this is another thing that's changed. That's my 10-year-old's Minecraft, one of her many Minecraft worlds. So I told her, why don't you start a YouTube channel? A lot of people like to see people doing Minecraft on YouTube, and you can get some ad revenue, and it's just too embarrassed, so she doesn't want to do that. So it's good about these digital opportunities are accessible at a much earlier age than both for the parents and for the kids. And again, so we see that by the way, these artifacts that you saw from the last slide, if you have any of them dusting it down at home, don't you dare throw that away. Because this generation has extreme affinity, puts an extreme affinity value on those old cassette players. Right now, it's actually Netflix shows are actually starting to bring back cassette tapes and creating narratives around that. So it's very interesting to them. It's very exotic to them to have that old technology. But now the technology itself is kind of going away, but the scale is becoming infinite. So we used to have this big bulky technology and the limited scale, and that has shifted. So you kind of see that from a very early age they have access to a much larger world. So I like to kind of think that we're kind of at that space in history. If you want to look at a very interesting historical analogy, I tend to think of that as the frontier, sort of the western frontier into the Wild West. I'm European, so for me it was very exciting to read about that, and I was very fascinated with how they just divided up the land, just move in there. It's all about the frontier. It's all about populating this area and getting people to move in there. And you, in the beginning, from what I understand, you actually owned the mineral rights. If you had not a digital turf, you had a real turf, you actually owned that whole patch of land. So you could do whatever you wanted to do with it. Later, you had big companies and smart people who understood that, I actually think the value is what's underneath there. The real value is not, those topsoil where you can grow potatoes and have chickens and have some cattle or whatever. That's really that kind of trade. That's nice and it's useful, but it's not really where the real value is. So after a while, you get the Exxon companies.
Turn left onto North Interstate 35.
And very fitting. I'm sure at North Interstate 35 there were a lot of these colonies. So anyway, so if we kind of look at where we are now in history, compared to that analog history of the Wild West frontier, we are at that point in time where we have been giving this turf, this digital turf, but we don't necessarily own the mineral rights to it. And that is what I believe that this next generation, just like you have this, when they divided up the land, it looked immediately like, okay, so Johnson has the same patch of land as Olsen over there, but it just turns out that Olsen had mineral rights and you didn't. So the third generation of the Olsen family, when Exxon wanted to drill for oil in there, they became billionaires while you are strapped for cash. So I think now we're kind of, the younger generation are starting to come of age in a time where we're really starting to discuss the real estate value of our digital turfs. Do you have mineral rights to it? Who owns your data? Do you own your own data, or is it other companies is it third parties who have access to it? So now that we are kind of where we are in history, we could imagine two different scenarios, because when you're a good futurist, you don't want to say, okay, this is the future, especially when you deal with human beings, because humans are fickle and we don't exactly know where society is going to take us and where social trends are going to take us. So it's very possible that Generation Z will end up in, kind of the same boiling pot that we've been boiling in for a long time, because quite frankly, we don't care about our data. I mean, seriously, most people really don't care about their data. And it's very possible that they don't care and that they're going to continue this trend. But I am going to try to show you guys today at least 7 different trends that I've followed for a while, which indicates that maybe they're going to be a little bit more like this. That they're actually going to bring some justice to the craziness. Because when you look at typically generational trends, social trends, it's not like you continue on a linear path. Social trends go a little bit that way, and then you pull it back again. And if you look at these generational histories, what is very typical for a generation to do is to really seriously question, critically question everything that the past generation did before them. So if they feel that we had this Wild West attitude to digital integrity or privacy issues, they're going to be the ones that are going to question this. I come from a social science background, as I mentioned, and I look at generational trends. One of the reasons that we're saying that there is a generational trend is because if you didn't have a generation that came up and questioned what the generation before did, then you would only have continuity. You wouldn't really have the factor that what creates social change is really that you have this one generation taking off after another and really questioning what the generation before them did. A lot of this has to do with other external influences, such as the recession, economic waves. We typically have long economic waves in history. Where you are born during that phase. If you're born during an economic expansion era versus when it's plateauing, or if you're born into a recession era, all of this is going to have some impact on how you view the reality around you. This is Ray Kurzweil down here, and he's also talking about these cyclical trends, but what he is talking about is really technological trends, which is looking like this. So, he too is talking about S-shapes. Almost any change that you will see will follow an S-curve. You have a phase that, in the beginning phase, you barely notice that it's a change. And then you have this exponential, crazy, everything's taking off, and then you have something, it kind of tapers off at the top. So we have that with social cycles on the human scales, and we also have that on the technological scale. We have the S-curve. It's just that this purple line here is going to go to the moon 415 times and back before it actually tapers off. So if we can imagine our kids today are growing up at a time where they're sort of beyond that, okay, new technology, oh, shiny gadget, oh yeah, interesting, very cool. We're seeing this in a lot of results in the service right now, that they're not so very mesmerized with all of these fancy glittering technologies as the generation before them. But the technological development is continuing. So we have a mismatch between where our technology is going and where society is going. Again, now we're getting to those trends that I'm talking about. I promise you. Okay. So, anyway. So, if we want to understand the possibility of them looking at that dilemma, that conflict, and turning it in a little bit direction, pulling the trend a little bit back, not going off on the deep end and say, yeah, I don't care about privacy, I don't care, as long as I have the shiniest gadget, I really don't care. If we can imagine a future that they're questioning that the track that we're on is going to be related to these trends. I'm going to talk about each of these trends individually. The first one I kind of mentioned is the parenting trends. When I first started looking into generational change, I started for a big global nutritional company, and they were hiring us futurists to look at how American families would look 5 to 25 years into the future. Like, what are the trends, what is going on? So basically, what we started looking at is like, what is changing already now? This was in early 2000s, and we wanted to understand how are parents today interacting technologically and otherwise with their parenting role, and how are they interacting with their children. What we noticed was, this is before social media. There wasn't really any social media back then. You still had these Google groups and Yahoo groups and all of these areas where these internet spaces where people could come together and discuss parenting, could discuss parenting philosophies, habits, their children. But what was very typical back then is that all parents who engaged in these discussion fora would want to be anonymous. They knew that if I have my face out there, if I come out with my name, people can figure out who my kids are. So they didn't want to discuss their families unless they were anonymous. I put in it, I call it high internet literacy, not necessarily because they were so literate about the internet. It was more the respect of the unknowns. It was still kind of early. It was before Web 2.0. It was before internet really started getting interactive. So people still had some hesitation. I remember one time when my oldest one was in preschool, and that poor teacher assistant who had recently established a MySpace account, and this was when MySpace was new. And she had looked at these wonderful, cute little kids that she had in her class. She took a picture and put it up on MySpace. I think she lost her job, actually, because the parents were in fear. Now all the predators are going to come and take our kids, and it was just, nobody was conditioned in a way to how do we deal with this situation. Now, a few years later, like in the latter part of the 2000s, I started getting the parenting blogs. I call them the Curators. Heather Armstrong was one of the first parent bloggers, and she became a parent blogger when she lost her job because she said something compromising about her boss, and he read it, and then so she turned herself into a full-time blogger, and her children kind of became a great part of the story, of the narrative that she talked about every day. Now, it's important to remember that the first bloggers, and I would still think that most parent bloggers today are well-educated, resourceful people who have had inner discussions with themselves, how far they want to go, what are the possible consequences of talking about my children in a public space. And if they so do it, it's because they are prepared for the consequences. They're prepared how far they can go, what they can talk about, and they've had that internal discussion with themselves before they decide to put their kids out as protagonists in their lives and in their blogs. But what they did by doing that is that they broke a taboo. Before this, it was very uncommon, like I said, to talk about their kids in public media, on the internet. But they broke a taboo that after we got social media, this happened. So we got the Sharons and the Oversharings. And this is sort of like, look, my baby made a poo. Look at this picture. It was very TMI, I'm oversharing, I'm sharing everything about my baby because I'm so obsessed with my baby that I think everybody else is obsessed with my baby. And if you want to check out a website about that, it's called STFU Parents Blog. And you will see she's collecting evidence of oversharing. So I actually wrote an article back in the early, I think it was in 2011, 2012, that I called Born on Facebook. One thing I noticed back then during that time was the context and the narratives around that time was very rarely directed towards parental sharing. Everything was directed to what are the kids sharing on media and what are we doing about it, but it was really the parents who were kind of sharing a lot of footage of their own children, and the discussion wasn't really there yet. Now it's there, but it wasn't really so much back then. And then finally, and this is the worst, the shamers. Anybody heard about people shaming their kids as a strategy, like a disciplining tool? There's some really sad stories that have come from that. There was a girl who committed suicide after her father had created a shaming video, and who knows what the original sin that they're actually the crime that they're doing in their houses to get this punishment. It's typically pretty innocuous, like twerking or something like that. And so, but the consequences of being a shamer parent is that you attract a lot of comment trolls, and you get a lot of feedback, positive feedback from them, and you might end up on the show, Dr. Phil show, with your kid sitting there being ashamed while Dr. Phil talks to your kid and tells them, "Don't do that anymore." "Oh, I won't do it." So that's the context that we have around sharing our children and the digital footprint of our children. So I'd followed this for a while, and we're starting to get surveys out. What do kids think about this? Back 5 years ago, they were too young to really answer a lot of surveys. Now the surveys are starting to come out, and they're pissed off. Kids are not very happy about the parents sharing all kind of stuff about them. There's actually a lawsuit in Austria where there's a girl who's suing her parents over something they did on Facebook with her. I don't know. Maybe that's just an excuse to make money. I don't know. But Europe has a little bit different rules about these things. So that's the first trend. Next one is ephemeral and dark social media and vertical networks. So one of the first reactions we found out when the kids were saying, Facebook is really for old people. I don't really want to be there because everything is so exposed. So they drifted to places like Snapchat. And Snapchat, when it came out, the whole sales pitch of Snapchat was that you could send a message that self-destructs after so many seconds. That was the whole idea. And of course it became a sexting tool, and then people learned how to take screenshots and keep that. So, but the original idea about Snapchat was precisely to be able to delete your digital footprint. And the very fact that there was the youngest cohorts that cared about these things kind of shows you that there's a consciousness around this. We call it dark social media. That's mostly because marketers really want to use this channel to reach people, and it's very hard for them to do that precisely because it's so vertical. And we're starting to see that they are verticalizing themselves. They're not really on these big platforms that we are. Like, we are all about LinkedIn and Facebook and these big, because we're older and we just haven't learned to use it. For us, it's like a binary. I'm either on social media or I'm not. For them, it's kind of like, it depends. And actually, there's a cast here. There's like social media, the way you use it, the different social media are like characters in a teen flick. So you have Snapchat, that's kind of like the BFF. That's like me and you, and I can be goofy, I can be myself, I can be authentic in this little room here, and this is our secrets. That's very different from Instagram. I know that these two companies have started competing a little bit more, but the original intent with these different social media was that for Instagram is very much around this, sharing photos and sharing the glossy part of your reality, whether that's a reality or a fake reality, but it's very much the queen bees. Now every teen flick has a queen bee, and the way she shows her social hierarchy is by snubbing people in the hallways. The way that the queen bees will snub you on Instagram is by blocking you. If you get blocked, that's sort of like, that's the stigma. Then you're not in her crowd. But these people have a place to go, so they'll go to Tumblr, and Tumblr is really where you can find your subgroup, your subculture. And so that's where the emos will go, and that's where you whatever you're interested in, you go to Tumblr, and then you find your little niche group there. And then you have YouTube, which is really entrepreneurial. If you're on YouTube, this is really a place that you go to market yourself. Like, this is my this is my Minecraft world, or this is what I'm selling, and I'm making this at home, and I'm selling it to you, or I want to be internet famous or something. That's where you go when that's your intent. Then you have Vines, which is pretty much the class clown, and just little silly little things, 8 seconds, because it's very it's all about that quick fun. And Facebook, that's like the family reunion. That's like where you go when you have to eat dinner with grandma and grandpa. That's really not, they don't hang out on Facebook because it's fun. So again, they're verticalizing themselves. This, to me, is a great sign that they are very concerned about their digital footprints in a way that they can control and contain it to the purpose of the media, instead of just, okay, it's digital, it's out there, I don't care, buy digital footprint. They're not about that. It's all, everything has a purpose. Some of my studies are showing that they spend a lot of time online. 86% actually do believe that they spend too much time online. They have experienced the internet as a place for being bullied or witnessing bullying. So again, this shiny object that those of us who are migrants into this society, this digital life, are not experiencing in our formative years. So these kids are actually experiencing this. And then that colors your perception of it a little bit. It colors your perception of what it means to live a digital life. And actually, they do prefer face-to-face interaction. If you compare this statistic to millennials, they're actually more about physical, brick and mortar type reality than millennials are. Again, I think that has something to do with being born into it, and for it not to be just being part of the conditions. I think maybe some of them might experiencing that they might want to have a play date, a physical play date. Well, the parents are saying, no, why don't you just do a FaceTime them or something? And then that value of having a digital fancy tool kind of declines a little bit, because it's this lesser option of what it could have been if they actually had a chance to meet them in person. The third trend that I wanted to talk about is how these young generations, and I'm saying generations because it's not only Generation Z, it's millennials before them as well, how they are actually more risk averse than older generations. Now, why this is, well, we've seen this since like the 90s, the early 90s, mid 90s, where we started seeing that there was a decline in juvenile delinquency and risk behaviors like binge drinking and drug use and sexual abuse and teenage pregnancy. All of this kind of has declined and declined and declined. It's very strange because based on your brain's development, risk-taking is supposed to be pretty high when you're young. And now there's a lot of statistics now that actually are showing that older people are engaging in more risky behaviors than young people. This is very strange. So if you look at this cohort and you look 10 years into the future, you talk about the risk of compromising your data, compromising your digital footprint. Well, that's a factor that plays into the risk assessment. So again, this is a generation that will have some possibly even premature thoughts around this area of digital integrity or data integrity. And why is that? Well, the Great Recession is one reason. We're starting to see that this is a generation that is taking less financial risks. Very many different surveys now are coming out, finding them starting to save much earlier, for example, than was coming just 20, 30 years ago. So they're actually saving for retirement, some of these kids. I mean, talk about fuddy-duddy. But what's interesting is that, again, you remember these cycles. So these 80-year cycles where generations will typically go 80 year or go, more like a cycle like this. So you have these commonalities between these different generational archetypes. This is a generation that shows a lot of similarities with their grandparents who were born during the Great Depression. So that was also a generation that was more sort of taking fewer risks. The next one I'm going to talk about is the Internet of Things and artificial intelligence as a gateway to your mind. Because again, they're growing up in a time where it's not only the World Wide Web and all the exchanges that you're doing on the World Wide Web, but it's everything that is happening in your house, how the gadgets in your house are communicated with other gadgets and stuff. So, so the latest generation of toys now, anybody heard of Hello Barbie?
Yep.
Yeah. So Hello Barbie is a robot, and what she will do is she has a artificially intelligent platform that allows her to. It's not extremely. It's not like Watson or anything like that, but it's capable enough to hold a meaningful conversation with a child, and then she learns. She collects that data, and she learns. She trains herself based on that data to continue to have conversation with this child, and that's using artificial intelligence to interact with this child. Now, whether that is troublesome or not, I guess that depends on how you see it. Now, I know that we're getting a lot of gadgets in our house that are doing precisely that, getting to know your habits, getting to know your like your thermostat, how you like to have you can program it exactly how you want it. We're getting Alexa, we're getting Cortana, we're getting Siri, we're having all of these digital assistants to help us. Now there's a difference here. The difference is that very few 5-year-olds will go up to the Nest thermostat on your wall and start having deep, meaningful conversation. Talk about their inner secrets to your thermostat. Or even to Alexa, because Alexa is in the middle of the room and they might order a big, 15 boxes of candy or something, and that kind of punishes itself. But they won't really open up the most heartfelt emotions, which they will do to a teddy bear and to a Barbie doll. Where does this data go? A cloud, right? So all of that data goes to a cloud. Did anybody here think that Mattel is going to sit on this data and say, we better not use this, we better not data money? No, this is theirs, that's private, we better not do it. Anybody believe that? Yeah?
Hooray for capitalism.
Yeah, exactly. As long as we live in a capitalistic motive, that has extreme value, right? I mean, that's extremely valuable for anybody who's going to want to mine it. Now, we didn't ask that 5-year-old if that 5-year-old wants to be met with that data and have their childhood secrets shared with big capitalist companies. When they're 25, how are they going to reflect on that? I don't know. So, here's another interesting survey. So this is just comparing, young millennials or young Gen X, Gen Zers, Gen millennials, and comparing them to older ones and finding out that the younger you are, the more you care about government surveillance. So if you take these older group and you compare that to people in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s, typically you'll see that the younger people are more skeptical to government surveillance. And so again, you have that line of conflict. You have a lot of data, just that we don't have the Wild West of all the private data that people have, and what people really care about, what this generation really care about. There's a huge delta there. If you look at things like who are installing VPNs or using proxy servers, again, now obviously the youngest people here are not using it as much as the cohort above. I think that has more to do with age and understanding what's possible to do on your computer, maybe parental limitation, things like that. But you see where the trend is going. So you have these two trends where we're having a modus operandi in our system that data is in the Wild West. We don't really have, it's under that turf that you don't have mining rights for, that somebody else owns. But the interest for being able to control it is growing. So there's a mismatch here. A few years ago, I was commissioned to do a survey for a big technology company that is going into smart appliances. And so we decided to hold a survey to find out how people are actually feeling about getting smart appliances into their homes, and what are some of the benefits and what are some of the disadvantages that these people, the respondents, might have. And I, of course, was mostly interested in the generational difference. We found differences along other variables as well, like women were a little bit more skeptical than men, and I think there was some geographical variation as well. I can't remember right now. But so typically you see the young people are interested in, if they were to use my smart appliances, is to save money because they care about their money. And to protect the environment. This is the benefit of smart appliances. Now if we look at the disadvantages, so you see that this younger group of people, if you look at the blue and the gray bar is really what you want to pay attention to here. It's very comparable to the older generations. Don't tell me that these guys that privacy is dead. Don't tell me that these people don't care about privacy and cybersecurity. They do, right? I mean, especially when you account for the fact that their brains haven't even fully developed and they're not really supposed to, at their age, be that interested in these issues, but they are. We say it over and over.
Can you read those, please? I can't even read the...
Oh, yes, absolutely. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's a little bit small. So the blue bar is... So they were asked, what are some of the greatest disadvantages? I didn't explain this, I'm so sorry. This is actually, they were supposed to rank between 4 different answer options. This is the first rank. So like everybody said, I ranked number 1, this is my main concern, this is my second, this is my third. So we took all the highest ranking answers and compared across the age groups. And so what the answer alternatives here are is the blue bar, personal data collected by third party or government. The orange one is not worth the extra cost. Gray is poses too much cybersecurity risk. Yellow is I'm worried about radiation from smart appliances. So there are people who are. So we wanted to have like these 4 different things that people would compare and find out what is it that you are most concerned about when it comes to smart appliances. As you can see, well, I will admit the youngest group are more concerned about the costs than the data, but I think it's a long shot from saying that they don't care about, saying that privacy is dead. Now, the other thing that is, another change that is happening in their environment at the same time is that we're changing the way that we look at monetary value. We're looking differently at currency. So this generation is growing up in a time where they see things like digital currency, cryptocurrency, reward points, peer-to-peer sharing economy exchanges. For them, they're growing up in a time, and this typically happened after the last recession, where a lot of people couldn't get jobs or were stuck in really underpaid jobs. So this is a lot of the explanation for how the sharing economy really started, is that people were looking at new avenues to try to trade services with one another. And so when you're growing up in this context with Bitcoin is just, it's a ledgers in the blockchain. It's not really physical. It's not controlled by the mint, right? So they're starting to see that, wow, value, monetary value is coming in very many different configurations. Why in the world should I just give my data away? Like, what? this generation actually asks questions around that, and we're starting to see that people are not so happy sharing everything anymore. It used to be when social media was new, everybody wanted to overshare themselves. Remember that those pictures with the oversharings, the parents who shared everything about their babies? Now we're starting to move more into a consciousness around the value of the stuff that you're sharing. So we can very easily imagine a near future where all of this personal information is taking on. It's not that, I don't want to share it with you because I'm on the dark web on Tor to sell kitty porn. No, it's not about that anymore. You know, it's not like these guys will not come up to you if you tell them I'm using the Tor server. They're not like, you're suspect. They don't have that attitude. They're very much like, okay, I understand that. You want to protect your data because guess what? There's a lot of money in that data. So they might want to be a little bit more attentive about their personal data and tell these big companies that, sure, yes, you can get access to my data, but you need to give me something in return, something that I can use. If you just take my data, if you, Verizon or AT&T, think that you can both charge me for the cable and charge me for my subscription to you, and on top of that, you're going to, have an extra stream of revenue by selling my data on top of that, no, that's not going to go well. So I think we might see more awareness around that. Anybody disagree with that, by the way?
There, of course, will be a chance to ask Anne questions at the end, so I hope you all do have questions. But yes, we actually have one hand raised there.
Yeah.
To be honest, I think that a lot of people who use torrent are not using it for the right reasons, just pirating things.
Yeah, actually I was saying Tor, but yeah, no, I agree with you. I think that you're right. A lot of people, when you use torrents, that's very much like you don't want to pay for it. Yeah, no, the Tor server is in the Tor project is like you guys can explain Tor better than me. But
The Tor project is basically, it's sort of for the onion router. It is a way to anonymize your web traffic by sending it through a ton of proxy servers, so it's hard to know where data originated from. So it's not completely anonymous, but it makes anonymity a lot easier. And I guess one last thing I'd like to say is, you're right, most people using BitTorrent are using it to share pirated materials, but I will also point out it actually, as a peer-to-peer protocol, has legit applications. A lot of academic researchers use it to share data and make it easier on their web loads, especially when they're dealing with large data sets. So it, in my opinion, is a misnomer to just tarnish the technology as purely having no legitimate law-abiding purposes. I will ignore the pirating because that's a big digression, but I could go off there too. All right, back to Anne.
okay. Well, thank you. Okay. Another trend that I've been paying attention to is education career opportunities. I did a survey with Knowledge Works. Actually, Liz is very familiar with this research because we wrote a research paper about it together. And this is basically, when I worked with this nonprofit called Knowledge Work earlier in about 6-7 months ago, we ran a survey across different age groups where we wanted to understand how are young people thinking about getting work in a future where possibly up to 50% of the jobs might be taken over by machines. Correlating with also a situation that they have to pay more tuition now than ever before. So that's a huge risk. It's gone from getting an education being a very good investment in your future to almost being gambling. So if you're going to get over $100,000 in student loan, you probably want to have an idea how that education is going to serve in the future. So we wanted to see, are young people starting to look at different opportunities, different ways of building their career path, like what are they doing, how are they responding to this new reality? So one of the things that we wanted to ask is, what are some of the skills that you believe are important for the future? And we run some text analysis, so open-ended questions, and run some text analysis on it and some word clouds. And so you can kind of see, we're starting off when you're very young, you kind of start a little bit idealistically, creativity, people skills, they're kind of all over the place. There's not really big consistency in their answers. Then you start, when you're in college, you start, you need knowledge, math, leadership, work hard, you know. So they're really starting to wake up and like, oh, okay, there's a hard reality out there for me. And then when you're post-college and you start going out in the world, you're like, oh, I need to figure out how I can sell all this. Like, how do I sell myself? So they become interested in networking and marketing and adaptability, people skills. So you're going to see a little bit of shift. These age spans, by the way, are not enough to say that there's a generational shift from the 13-year-old group to the 25-year-old group. It's just that this is what we call a life cycle effect or an age effect. Most of the life cycle, as you start off one place and then you end up a different place based on the experiences you have. But that's not like a generational change that is happening. This happens across every generation based on where you are in life. And the truth is that most of these people, most of the jobs that are going to be available to them are the ones, can everybody read the green dots here and the pink dots? I'm going to read that. I know it's a little bit unclear.
You could also potentially hit Control and plus on your keyboard. That might enlarge the slide. The way it's PowerPoint, it won't do that. I'm thinking web browsers. Never mind.
Oh, okay. What was that?
Well, Control plus, I don't know if that works in PowerPoint or not.
Oh, yeah.
Off the top of my head.
Yeah, it didn't. But I'll quickly let you know. Yeah, this is a little, yeah, not too good. So these pink dots are the jobs that will have fallen from 1980 to 2012. Jobs like truck drivers, auto mechanics, machinists, accounting clerks, car printers, welders. And then you have the green dots. These are the jobs that are growing. And these are typical, a lot of them are like InfoSec jobs and cybersecurity jobs, or where you need to have a pretty high level of digital literacy to get these jobs, like financial managers, physicians, computer scientists, accountants. So, and all of these jobs are jobs that we've now seeing quickly getting automated. We're quickly starting to take some of those old analog ways of operating and integrating it with digital interfaces. So in order to get a career in these fields, you kind of have to have a very high level of digital literacy. Now, so it's like even if you didn't have any motivation on your own to develop the digital literacy, to have an understanding and a very highly developed understanding around your digital privacy and integrity, you will get it just by means of the jobs that are waiting for you, the jobs that you will have to go into. So there's like a push and there's a pull factor that pushes that awareness. So again, digital jobs. And then I'm getting to kind of wrap up my the last point, where I'm just a metaphor. It's just a metaphor for me to what can happen. So anybody aware of their Knowing Orange? It was one of those. It was one of those shows that got their start on YouTube. And it's one of those interesting phenomena where you just kids sitting together, like, this is an interesting idea, you bring up on YouTube. So the Knowing Orange actually ended up getting a show on TV, but he started kind of losing a little bit out there. After a while, the Knowing Orange lost a lot of audience. Now, the thing about Knowing Oranges is that they're opportunistic. They're not particularly smart, but they're very shrewd. And they will see, okay, I'm not getting enough attention here on YouTube anymore. Okay, I'm going to go to TV. So now, like, we used to have these silos. You can get your career in being an expert, or you can get your career in entertainment, or you can get your career in political office. And now there's a lot of migration between all of these areas. And so oranges can run for office. I mean, so anyway, the thing about what is important to remember with oranges is that they're opportunistic and they will use whatever data is available to them. And when you grow up in a reality where your data is only there's really no limits to how your personal data can be used. It can be data mined, you can use it to win elections, you can use it to, interrogate people. That's another, if your political reality is changing around you, you're going to be a little bit more aware of your digital footprints, is my maybe very premature analysis of the situation. So anyway, that's my last slide. I don't have anything more. Yeah, so if there's any questions.
Yeah, so I guess if that's the conclusion of this talk, does anybody have questions about Gen Z and privacy for Anne?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've got a question here, Anne. As much of a statement as the beginning. Obviously, I'm not Gen Z. I'm a boomer. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's my attitude on data. If a company's having access to my data, my biggest concern is, well, it's not even a concern. It's what they're going to do with it. Now, if they're going to use it to try and influence me to buy something, to show me adverts that are, you bought this book, and like the Amazon thing, you bought this book and so you might like these things. I've got to the stage where I'm not going to be influenced or persuaded by any of that. So I'm going to use my own characteristics. What was that? Sorry?
Yes, you are.
You are. You are.
Okay, all right. So you tell me what I think and do more than I do myself. But just bear with me a second. So I'm just wondering the extent to which these younger generations are applying some of those characteristics of curiosity and skepticism and what have you. Because the collection of the data in and of itself doesn't seem to be that sinister to me. It's more about the ways in which they're trying to persuade or influence me to do something that, hitherto I might not choose to do. So that's a long way of saying, you know what I mean? What are we seeing amongst the younger generation that it's getting them to sort of embrace that?
So
control, if you like.
Yeah.
They actually have more control than they think they do.
So I have two answers to that. Like, one is that I think that you're going to see them being a lot more blasé after a while, once they realize that, okay, I'm being put into this filter bubble where, okay, I did a search for this product and now everything else is popping up around that topic. So I think maybe what you'll see is what happened to millennials when FCC reduced a lot of legal restrictions on advertising to children. What happened is that advertising to children just took off. But what's actually happening now is that younger people, like millennials, are the least influenced by advertising. So it's kind of this law of diminishing returns. And I really do think that we can expect the same with these post-millennials, absolutely. So that's one of my answers. I forget the other answer I had for you. Slipped my mind, but definitely that's we do see some of that wearing off. I think maybe possibly the argument that I've been trying to make, going from this, we're just frogs boiling in the water, we're okay with it, we're getting convenience, as long as we get convenience, it's okay. I think maybe a lot of them will say that no, Murphy's law applies, that if you have data, whatever can go wrong will go wrong. You have the data, and it's just too many interests to involve so you can't really predict the future, but you can predict with a certain level of certainty that your data is going to be misused given the wrong situation, the wrong circumstances. That's my guess. Yeah.
So then, how do you, as a follow-on to her question and kind of a counterpoint to it too, but how do you fight when organizations like Google are actually buying your physical credit card and in-store purchase data, tying it to your account, and then advertising it to you? Because, the thing is great, they know what I search for online, et cetera. Amazon, Facebook, and Google pretty much share data, completely across the board. So if I'm shopping for something on Amazon, I see it, ads for it on, Facebook later on. But then, now they're tying this data in from the real world about what I actually go to a store and physically buy. How do you protect that data now that,
Or I think
Yeah, there's no
being-
firewall for
is
that.
being
you know?
smart
Yeah.
about your data good enough? Good enough.
Being smart about your data.
Is being smart, yeah. Is you know, like they say, is hiding behind a Tor server, using a VPN.
Yeah.
In the Internet of Things, is that enough?
You're asking the wrong person. I'm just looking at the social variables. But yeah, no, I don't know. And I think that if they're waking up to reality where they feel like that is not enough, who knows? So, yeah.
From a more social perspective, I think you were talking about privacy and about behaviors of the younger generation, but we slipped over a thing that I think is a very key differentiation. So you said that kids stopped using Facebook because their parents were on it and they started using Snapchat. That doesn't make any difference to the amount of data that they are giving away, right? That makes a very big difference to the social groups to whom they are sharing that data with. But it doesn't stop producing it, and it doesn't stop giving it to advertisers. It doesn't stop, maybe it's slightly harder to market to a dark social network or something, but Snapchat's trying to make money. They're not doing a good job, but they're trying. And so, like, do you see that distinction as growing? Because when I start thinking about being conscious of my data, I'm not just conscious of the people that I know who are seeing it. I'm conscious of the machine learning algorithms that are calling it and stuff. And from the trends you're talking about, I don't see that being represented in the younger generation like dramatically more. But I do see the social consciousness. Right, so it's sort of my generation coming up with social networks, right? Like we were blogging all the time, right?
Yeah.
There were social networks. And blogging is inherently open to everybody because there aren't privacy settings on your blog, right, when you're running a website, like in the 90s. And now that's like really, really exposed, and you're much more likely to share with specific people, like your slide was showing, right? Like the idea of Instagram with or the Snapchat with your BFFs, like being yourself. So do you see just the social aspects changing, or is there more consciousness of the bigger, like, your data as currency?
I guess, maybe, I think, to distill that down, I think the question specifically is the current generation clearly cares about the data they're sharing with their social sphere, but do they care more about, say, maybe the surveillance via government or corporation aspect of it? Does the data reveal they care about that, or is it just that they don't want that embarrassing picture getting to people that they don't want to see it?
Well, I think maybe the stats on how many are using VPNs and how many care about NSA and things like that, I think those stats are sort of showing a picture that, I think there's an emergence of an awareness there. I'm not 100% sure, but I also think that when that little 5-year-old just talked to her Barbie doll for 4 years or something and shared absolutely everything she knows, if something happened, if you have like sort of a horrible experience with that some data was leaked and suddenly you could replicate this person is now 25 years old and you can replicate that person because some hackers got a hold of that data that was very unique, like her childhood. Those are the kind of scenarios where you can envision that you suddenly have a new awareness where people are like, oh shoot, what did we do back then? We were crazy. So, but I think in the absence of that, maybe not. I think maybe you might be right that most people will not care about it, but I think maybe there might be an emerging awareness, and that is being birthed by this awareness that I don't want everybody to see my pictures. So the consequence of that, I better protect my data. But yeah.
So I'm interested more in like the social science aspect of it. How does that break down geographically? So in the U.S., data is property, and so our property rights history and our ethos is really that you own the data, you own the property, and you have that right as a corporation. Whereas in Europe, Korea, Japan, a lot of other countries, the property is yours as a person, and the company can't assert that control, and so they have the right to be forgotten, and all the other rights have been codified in GDPR. How does the studies that you've been doing compare with the same age audiences in those different countries, but are the responses different? in accordance with those different views on property rights?
Right. I only have mostly anecdotal data from Europe and from other parts of the world, because I think that, it's very unusual to actually get surveys, that representative surveys that show what young people are caring about, especially in this domain. For some reason, researchers are very late to come on to interest in this particular aspect of it. So they're few and far between. I just have not come across a survey yet from Europe or similar or another continent to let me know if there's a difference there. So
is most of your data US?
As far as representative service, yes.
Okay.
I do have these anecdotal pieces, like that girl in Austria who was suing her parents for putting her on Facebook. So you do have that. But I also, one thing I do know is that because of a lot of these laws that you already have in place in Europe, it's not such a big issue, because if you have something compromising about yourself out there on the internet, you have a right to be forgotten, for example, and your parent, you're basically not allowed to share as much over there. It's basically illegal. So you don't have as much compromising data in the system to begin with. So for example, these parent shamers, these parents are shaming their kids on the internet, that there would be alarms if somebody did that in Europe. There would be, yeah. No, I've never heard of that happening over there anyway. So.
So, you mentioned with the different platforms that kids are really good at creating different personalities on the different platforms, and I think that's one thing, they're very good at curating an image and a personality and things. And I'm curious, I feel like one of the first places where there's going to be starting to be evaluated is with college admissions. Are college admissions accepting online personas as part of the application? Can you put in your Twitter handle or your Facebook page or your blog or that kind of thing? Are colleges starting to look at that? Are they saying, no, we won't look at anything online at all? Or do they look at Facebook pages? How are they handling that?
It's a really good question.
Isn't there just a big thing about that?
Yeah, I was about to say there was a very big news story that recently just came out that Harvard rescinded its admission offer for 10 prospective students in the incoming fall class, specifically because it was found out that they were members of a private Facebook group that was sharing a bunch of very offensive alt-right style memes, and Harvard basically is like, we do not want students like this representing our institution, so no, your admission is rescinded. So it is starting to potentially be a factor.
But not the flip side, right, where you say, look how good my social media is.
That's a good point. I don't know.
Probably, companies are researching that. Colleges are probably next to be the customer to use that data.
The cynical part of me would say that, if companies and the government are looking at what you do online, I have to believe universities in evaluating incoming students positively or negatively. I would say yes, absolutely.
I think something I read in an article about that, what Harvard had done, said that 30-some% of admissions officers were utilizing social media data about applicants. It didn't say with permission or because it was recommended to them. It just said that they were searching for.
They use their receptionist. Sorry to interject.
Oh, no.
There's a law beside the story, and all of the people waiting to be interviewed are sitting there in the lobby, and the receptionist starts talking to them and befriends them and asks them about their Facebook handles. Well, without those people's knowledge, she was sharing that information with the people doing the interviews. So then they would go back and look at all their Facebook profiles to see if this is somebody that they really wanted to hire. So it was without their knowledge. I know, and that wasn't the only story that I've heard, but.
Wow, yeah.
Companies for certain look up social media profiles for applicants.
I think
across the board.
If you're hired based off your social media platform, you're probably going to be working for a social media company, right?
No, it's everybody uses it.
Yeah.
There have actually been stories of, at certain job interviews, I've heard certain companies have literally, to prospective clients, demanded access to their social media profile if it wasn't publicly listed. They're like, you want to work here, log in and let me see your social media account. And there have been stories of people outright walking out of interviews because they're like, I don't want to work at a place that insists I show you this. So it is happening, actually.
How does that work with the number of people who would refuse, if a company asked for your social media profile, are the Generation Z more likely to say no and walk out of a place like that?
I wouldn't know. I mean, I
Yeah.
certainly would walk out and say no if
I would as
asked
well,
me.
but I wonder what the sociological trends of it.
But what skill set does that show?
It's my personal life, you know. I compartmentalize my
It
life.
doesn't show you what you can do.
Well, the same thing would go for the Harvard
If you're in marketing, you absolutely
rescission,
that's a job requirement.
Yeah, you have a very nice.
I'm happy how many micro conversations are starting, but let's corral it back a bit. And I guess based on everything you've heard bouncing around again, do you have any thoughts or insights you would like to contribute to sort of these points that have been raised? Or,
Yeah, I've read anecdotal stories like that. For a while, where your people's Facebook or social media accounts have been considered either for work or for college admission, and I really don't. I haven't seen any. I'm not qualified to say what is going to be common in the future based on my little bit of encounter with those few experiences that I have with that. One thing I do remember very clearly when I held a lecture for I think it was Texas State, where I talked to some students there who were like young, 18, 19 years old. And they had been asked to create a Facebook profile for the university to communicate with them on Facebook. And they were like, we're not on Facebook, we're too young for that. So that was basically my, what I heard from them is that it's not so much that you can see what I have on Facebook, it's just that I'm not there because that's where my mom is and her friends. So that's basically what I've heard, but I really don't know. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's pretty clear, right, that younger people care about privacy, and they think about it. Who do they think should regulate it? Or do they think it should be regulated, and do they think the government should do it? Or is that something that they say businesses should do it and I'll just choose the right businesses? I mean, is there any data on that?
Not directly related to that because I don't know. I mean, I haven't had a chance to either ask that question myself or seen surveys that have asked that question. But one thing that we are seeing with these younger generations, they're really voting with their feet a lot. So we're starting to see much more awareness of the companies that young people want to deal with have to stand for much more than just the service that they're providing. We see that everywhere. Transparency is very important. Triple bottom line is very important. So young people, young consumers.
What was the last one?
Triple bottom line or conscious. That you care about the environment, you care about the social, you care about far more than just the existing bottom line. So they care about the holistic. They're having a holistic evaluation of the business that they want to deal with, and the reason that is interesting is because young people have been, especially the last two generations, have been viewed as politically apathetic. And so a lot of experts have come out and said that, well, it's not so much that they're apolitical and using non-political platform to solve problems, it's that they've lost a lot of faith in politics in general, and especially the political binary, that is going on. They kind of look at other solutions. So they feel like they can leverage more power by going beyond these traditional political legal channels and vote with their feet by choosing companies that adhere to their ideals. And so one of the reasons I think it was very smart of Apple to kind of make privacy their big thing, because that's sort of their slogan. It seems like making data integrity is very big for Apple. I think that was very smart of them because that's how they can retain this generation. And that's the point I'm trying to make really when I talk to my clients, is that if you take these issues seriously now, if you embed data security and privacy policies into your products right now, and that's your brand and that's your market focus, this is going to pay off much more than cutting some few costs here and now, because you're going to retain that generation. You're going to build trust. It's so easy to lose trust, and then when you lose trust, you lost them for life. But if you are able to retain that trust, because you have, you know, you stand behind your data, and you stand behind your promise that you won't misuse their data, you're not going to sell it to the government, whatever. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think we have to get out of this kind of wild ride that we are politically right now before we really see the emergence of a political person or a trust enough among this generation to trust that government or trust that the legal system is going to look after them. Because I really don't think that they believe that's possible right now. Yeah?
Where do kids go to learn about privacy?
Their parents. Yeah. And
Is
so that they really
there formal education? Because I know like we did typing growing up. Like we had typing classes, that was
Yeah.
like the technology, you learned keyboarding and word processing.
Yeah.
What are the like formal classes for kids about technology now?
So it's very little, and that's I actually have talked at another conference a few months ago about this issue, and I was asked a very similar question. What are some of the authorities that are instilling or teaching children about data and data integrity? And we're actually talking about fake news also. All of these unforeseen consequences of our digital world. Where do they go to learn? They don't learn about it in school because the teachers don't know about it. So that's the problem. Oh yeah, no, please, we have one here, please.
I think we should just teach kids by immersion, toss them in the deep end, let them learn.
Okay.
So
if they
very Darwinian.
flail around,
Sink or
if they
swim?
start flailing around too much, then toss a buoy out to them.
Okay.
So I can accelerate that process. I have a few compromising photos I can share tonight.
I'm on the screen.
I'm on the screen. Why would you let them expose themselves like that?
Because let them learn.
I don't know about my
Letting
part
them learn,
of
it
things.
follows them around for the rest of their life.
I can't help but think of an Onion article about this that was basically like all people under 18 are disqualified from ever being president.
Yeah.
So to answer, to kind of follow up on that question, I worked for an educational publisher for a while, and we did a lot of digital literacy and financial literacy materials. And there are a lot of schools, and there's like independent school districts that are starting to try to put money towards digital literacy specifically, and things about like digital footprint and social media profiles and things like that. But it's one of those things that like, as much as we try to create engaging modules, it's like, they've got the internet, they've got so much other things that are like engaging and distracting, that it was always kind of like you could make something and then by the time you made it, it was kind of outdated. You could make it and you could, and so we kind of tried to keep iterating on like a web resource that could just be like, hey, you can read about a digital footprint, but whether or not that kind of stuff stuck was hard to see.
Yeah.
It was really challenging.
And actually, one thing I would actually like to jump on that's relevant to the discussion that's being had right now is this is actually one thing EFF-Austin's been talking about internally of trying to create sort of educational modules about privacy, digital literacy, footprint, that sort of thing, that we could eventually, you know, sort of do as workshops that you take to things like high schools to educate. This is something that does not happen because we just haven't had the bandwidth to get it done because we're a limited all-volunteer group. So if that's something you want to see happen, well, we are very much we do what our community wants to do. So if that's something you'd like to see happen, you can be the one to come to us and say, with your support, I would like to make this happen. And you can make that your project and drive it. So if that interests you, any of you in the room, please get with me and we can talk about trying to make that happen. So anyway, more questions?
Yeah.
So something else that I'm curious about is because I see a lot of similarities between kids and then also like the people I know in my life who just don't use technology on a regular basis are kind of similar. And do you see like, what are some of the societal norms that kids are developing around technology that adults could learn from?
Pragmatism. I think so. That's what I see in both observationally and also in studies. Again, the luster is gone. Like digital technology is not this, you know, shiny gizmo. It's not like the flying car for them, like it is for many people who are digital migrants. So again, they will use technology when they have to, but it's not something that ties them down. It's not like I need the latest upgrade, I need this, I need that. So I think that, but then again, you know, again, is okay, I'd like to meet you in person, but right now my parents don't want to drive me, so I guess we're going to do a FaceTime instead. So it's sort of, instead of like, there were these cartoons a few years ago with millennials texting each other, and then they were sitting right across from each other. Why don't you talk? Well, we have this wonderful technology, so why do we need to talk? That's going away. That's not, the younger generation will ask the same question, why in the world are you texting each other when you can talk? So they will go out of their way to make the real world matter. But at the same time, they also have this digital savvy, so they know how to operate it, but it's not directing their activities as much, or their behavior as much as maybe older generation.
Anybody else? Oh.
Yeah.
Would you say people are less risk adverse because of all the data that's being recorded about them throughout their lives?
Yeah. I think the very reason that we got the ephemeral media, I think that had a lot to do with it. That people felt that either I have to be a fake person, or you know, this is digital footprints. So I'm going to either take on this persona, which is fake, or I need to find a way to at least minimize that audience, or the channels that my digital footprints can be collected by. So that's another interesting contradiction there right now, is that younger generations are very much seeking authenticity. They want to have more authenticity in both the companies they engage with and in digital platforms as well. But it's very difficult to be authentic when you feel like this is your most vulnerable self. So actually one of the interesting trends, social trends that I've seen lately is this be yourself, like I don't know, it's these memes where you admit to some very embarrassing habit that you have.
Well, like confession bear memes?
Yeah, confession. Yeah, that's exactly what I was looking for. This confession trend, you know, where you're about, you know, I confess this is my less perfect self. So, and I think that's a little bit of reaction to precisely that we feel very forced to, limited by our digital footprints.
If nobody else, since I think we're mostly done with questions, I actually have one question that I think might make her interesting one to close with you on. So you talked about that one of the primary drivers of change is an upcoming generation looks at how things are, how their prior generations have made things, and they're able to, with clearer eyes, critique what's been done and want to change things. So your research indicates the upcoming generation, against the common wisdom, at least in certain ways cares about privacy. Now the exact reasons of in what context or why may be a little murky still from the surveys, but clearly they care about it for some reason. I guess my question is, what are they wanting to change about how things are right now? Is there information about what, so they don't like how certain things are because they care about their privacy, what do they want to do differently? How do they want to change things, improve things, fix the millennials and Gen X's and the boomers' mistakes?
I think that's the next chapter. That's what I'm looking for. And I'm using all of these other signals and trying to putting them together to build a hypothesis. And then I'm waiting for the confirmation by exactly, you know, what are the action items we do in order to, but I feel like right now, with the surveys that are coming out, we're just starting to build that awareness. And even that awareness is just, you know, very early still. So I think that maybe as we go a little bit further, and the fact that a lot of these kids are going to end up becoming cybersecurity experts and white hat hackers, and a lot of them are going to end up in those positions. I think in 10 years we're going to have a pretty clear picture of how they're going to divide up these digital turfs in the West. Like what kind of legal framework and what kind of guidelines are we building? Like, should you own mineral rights to your turf or should you not? Like, who owns it? I think that they're going to become more clear and they're going to help us crystallize maybe some of those ideas precisely because their childhood is so framed by growing up in its absence. So that's going to be a longing for them, I believe. But again, that's just me guessing. Yeah.
Does anybody else have any final questions before we adjourn?
Is computer literacy in general increasing as the generations go by? I mean,
I believe so. I really do believe so. I mean, again, that's again, you know, the fact that they're using VPNs, the fact that you have, you know, kids looking at learning coding in school, becoming awareness of STEM. So you have different statistics saying different things. So, you know, we don't have enough. So the millennials are about the same size as boomers, and we don't have enough technologists and engineers to fill the roles that are going away. So that could be an indication that we, in terms of numbers, we might not have as many people. I don't know if that translates to this generation being less digital literate, but I think most of the surveys that come out to me shows me that the digital awareness, at least, awareness around this new sociology, I think that they have that much more than the older generations.
Anybody else?
I would say if you're genuinely interested and you're worried about your data being used, look at the fine print. If you have an agreement with your data provider, read that. I have heard that AT&T, you know, if you pay an extra $50 a month, they won't sell your data.
Well, that requires trusting them, but at least there might be some legal leverage if you could somehow prove they have.
If you could, you know, I mean,
Well, I mean,
if it's the NSA,
they just voted that all was fair in that business.
But,
I mean, in Congress, I mean, they just voted all was fair.
I mean, how many people have read privacy policies?
Who wants to?
I mean, I've scanned a few of them. They repeat a lot of similar things. I mean, it's funny that is a solution. It's easy to say that, but I think somebody did a study where if you were to actually read every end user license agreement you agree to in an average year, it would take you 90 days of that year to read all the things you agree to. Does not sound like a very practical solution to me.
This isn't new, though. If you've ever bought a house, they just put page after page in front of you and urge you not to read it.
And at the same time, when you do read it, well, what if you find it's using your data, you know? But again...
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to do anything, because you
Yeah.
have to say no to everybody.
Yeah.
You have to assume that everything you're doing is
You've either got to
recorded.
agree or they don't let you use
I
their
can't
system.
help but wonder if some of Gen Z's risk averseness is a feeling of what even can I do about these problems? I'm an activist about this stuff and want to believe we can fix them. And I often kind of want to throw my hands up and go, what can we do about all this? We're fighting these implacable forces. But I don't know, I don't know, maybe I have a weird millennial optimism that I'm kind of like, we can solve these, you know? I don't know, maybe Gen Z is smarter than I am. Or not.
Your conclusions, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just saying you should provide false data.
Oh,
So
the Discordian approach, just sow chaos.
Your conclusions are, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No.
Your conclusions are counter to what has been my intuition about whether or not what I will call children care about privacy. And I think maybe it's because I have a certain idea about what privacy is. Privacy is staying anonymous, not selling it to the right person. Who is doing the kind of research, and where does one find more of the kind of research you're coming across, or that you're using to draw your conclusions?
I use a variety of sources. There are some very good books that have been written about young people in the digital age. One I will mention is the book from Dana Boyd. I can't remember the name of her book. It's a little bit dated right now. But if you search up Dana Boyd, fantastic, phenomenal. She's worked for Microsoft for a long time, and she's really found out. Like one of the things that she found out was that kids will hide in plain daylight. So they're creating codes and code words and different ways of manipulating the data around them.
It's complicated?
It's complicated, yes. So that's, and it's complicated, she's saying it's complicated because it's a little bit like, yes, on the one hand, on the other hand, it's like, it's a little bit of that, we don't know where we are yet. They're trying to cultivate, or trying to shape a new culture around digital habits and what you do and what you don't do. Another book that I think is really good is called Screen Wise. That's actually more of a parenting book. It's more a book written for parents who wonder how should I raise my kids. Actually, to that question about where can kids learn about privacy and they learn from the parents, I think that's a very good way to start for parents to actually educate themselves about these things. So what she's doing, this is Deborah Heitner. She's a professor. She's a media professor. I forget which university, somewhere up north. But she's done a lot of research on young people and how they're using data, how they're using platforms, and finding out a lot about anthropologically, basically how. For example, one of the things that she's saying is that for kids, one of the reasons that kids are not so enamored with all of these digital opportunities, like when we get home from work and we're tired of our coworkers, we'll lock the door, we'll get a stiff drink, and we'll turn on a Netflix show. Kids have 140 text messages waiting for them, and every single one needs to be answered. They have people who need likes on their pages. If you don't do that, you're really messing up the social order, and it's exhausting. So that's one element I forgot to mention is like in their digital culture, a lot of that is actually feeling a little bit forced for them. It's like they don't always want to sit there with their screens, but they have to because their friends expect them to. So I suggest reading those books. My research is a little bit, I have to look in many different directions. I draw parallels with trends. What are they doing in this domain? What are they doing in this domain? And this is just one of those domains. Yeah. And the Pew Research are starting to get some really good surveys out about it too.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Just a quick follow-on in terms of anonymizing data. For example, what do you think of the browser plugins like Noisy or there's another couple ones that basically like go to random websites using your connection and your cookies and stuff to just overwhelm, whoever may be watching, right? Your browsing habits and whatnot. What are your thoughts on going that way versus doing something like Tor or running no script or anything like just kind of going 180 degrees the other way and just overwhelming them with data that's completely useless?
I'm not really sure. Again, that's more of the technical part, I'm more of the social part. If that becomes a trend, I want to follow it. I want to see if that is something that they will start using. Yeah.
So in places like Germany, they have like mass censorships of things like games, for example, like Half-Life. I'm not even sure why, but they only just recently got an uncensored version, and it's been out for 15 to 20 years, something like that. Mm-hmm. And so places like there, you might want to use an anonymous browser to just get something that everybody else has, but you don't because of region restrictions and stuff. Lots of countries have things like that, little ticks like that. But in a place like this where we don't have very many region restrictions, what kind of incentives do we have for just anonymizing any sort of data other than like transaction information that might get people to steal our money?
I don't know if I understood your question correctly.
Well, I mean,
Are you asking why use Tor? Why use anonymizers?
Yeah, why guard information about you that's not going to make people steal your money or something like that, or take your job?
I think it's more like, just a sense of feeling like you might want to go somewhere and you don't want the cameras on you all the time. When we visit a website and they collect the IP address and they can see what to search for. I think it's just for a lot of people just kind of like to feel like I don't always want to be watched. I want to visit places and not have those cameras watching me all the time. I don't know. I mean, I think people have different sensibilities around that. So, but actually, about the torrent, you know, like you mentioned that about region restrictions, I think that's a very good excuse also to use torrents. I'll admit it. I've done it myself a couple of times because I just could not get shows from my country that I wanted to show my kids. Torrents was a way to bypass those restrictions.
Yeah,
Don't call me now.
There are some people that actually pay money for a VPN just so that they can buy a movie legally rather than have to go to torrent because it's region locked in their country or something.
Right.
Like in China, they've got a lot of restrictions on apps and such. It's weird in some of those places.
Huh. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Is the data that you've shown today summarized anywhere? Do you have papers out that we can go look at?
I have a blog.
Okay.
So actually I have it sorted, like I've written different blog posts under different themes. I don't think I have anything specifically on cybersecurity, but if you go in my search bar, you can, I've tagged it. I think I tagged it cybersecurity or privacy, yeah.
Okay.
And actually kind of jumping off that, I know you alluded to, you know, certain books and works cited. Could you potentially put together a list of those books and references so that I could share them with the meetup group and the Facebook group so people could peruse that at their leisure afterwards if they want to research this more?
Yeah, absolutely. I can put together, what I'm afraid of is that this is very much a frontier. This research itself is pretty much a frontier itself. So it's like when you see books, again, and that's another problem with being a future is that once a book has gone through the publishing, it's already
well out of date.
Yeah, so I use a lot of sort of articles and just kind of know who's writing about what and yeah.
With the caveat that the older something is, the less accurate it already is, the more out of date it is. If you could provide a few of those books or other things that you use to get yours, just because I'm sure some of the people here would be interested in following up more on this because it's a fascinating area.
Absolutely, yeah, I'll do that.
Thank you.
Sure.
On his note about incentive,
Uh-huh.
the way I look at it is it's how what is the value you put on your data, but something that I would suggest if you're curious about that, if you haven't read it yet, read Little Brother by Cory Doctorow. And there's a series of them, but that's the first one, and that book's excellent for along that line of thought.
Well, that was a real question, right? You were asking the group, is there really nobody here who can think of any reason why you'd want to be anonymous?
Mine is, like I said, it's for it's the value you place on your data. For them, so.
Yeah.
I mean, I place great value on my data,
keep
so
my
I
job.
can make a ton of
And
fake data.
there are opinions that might cause me to lose it if they were public. I like working. I work and live around people whose social behavior, their sexual preferences might cause them to lose their jobs. Certainly would cause them to lose their families if it was to become public.
Yeah, there's certain countries that can have you arrested or killed for stuff like that.
The United States, it uses, that's a little heavy-handed. In the United States, is what I'm trying to say, there are social groups that one might want to belong to that are perfectly fine if you're out in the open and part of it, and not so fine if you belong to a different group. Whether it be being gay or owning guns, or there are different groups that you might want to belong to, or opinions you might hold. Edward Snowden, a very controversial guy. If you were to express the wrong opinion in the wrong place, it could cost you friends or cost you all kinds of things. And so staying anonymous has a lot of value socially, economically, in terms of your status, in terms of
Least cost.
Again?
Least cost.
Well, there's a lot at risk,
Well,
if
and
you're not.
there's more monitoring than ever. You have more cameras, you have Alexas, you have those Nest. Who knows what they can report about you?
And so one of the things when I hear you describe that people do care about their privacy, I don't hear that that hasn't been reinforced very much in popular opinion or on the media, so like podcasts that I hear of younger folks talking. For example, this gentleman mentioned the recent decision to allow ISPs to collect information. And I haven't heard that very well even described in popular media. People talk like it's the same as getting onto an app and letting them collect the data, like having a rewards card at Randall's. I don't think people understand. And they talk about hiding that information by setting your privacy settings in Facebook. I don't think people really understand what information is vulnerable.
Zuckerberg owns it anyway, whether you put it.
Beg your pardon?
Zuckerberg owns your photos anyway, right?
No.
If you put them on there.
Yeah.
Can I just ask a quick question, especially the younger sort of technologists here? I was at a talk by Steve Case last year. He was bringing out the third wave. He was the former co-founder of AOL.com, and on the this was at the Palmer Center, Long Center, and on the stage there was a young techie who had this thing around his neck that every 15 seconds was taking a picture. Now obviously it was outward facing, so it was taking a picture of whoever he was facing, and was very proud of this fact, and also that it was one day going to be capturing audio as well. Now that actually horrifies the hell out of me. That people would be wandering around thinking it was because that's privacy. It may not be digital privacy as we're discussing it, but it's still the right of me as I'm wandering around, Austin's highways and byways, not to have somebody capturing images or things that I might be doing.
So one of the complaints about Google Glass.
Exactly. But I was just wondering, how popular is that concept? Because it seems to me a huge infringement of everybody else's privacy, that someone should think that those kind of products are okay to market and wander around, and God knows what they're going to be doing with the stuff that they're capturing.
The other side of that is I don't know, you read about back doors that are left intentionally in equipment. I mean, just do a thought experiment. How many ways could you be vulnerable, whether you're going through VPN or not? You'd have no idea what something inside the code is doing.
Your smart TV.
I think to get back to her original question. All right, people in the room who view themselves as youngish, what do you think about the scenario she gave? Does that bother you? Does that not bother you? Why?
It's a double-edged sword, because I want my privacy, but if I'm in the public domain, I'm out there. I can't say that you can't take a picture that I may be in.
Yeah, but yes and no. So I think the public domain changes a little bit, right? Because the public domain is built on the assumption that if something is public, you're right. It belongs to the public because you knew going out that you were putting yourself out there. The difference is, right? So you can agree that, look, if this guy's taking, 1 million pictures a day, so be it. The problem is that the algorithm technology is changing so much
and the
that you're able
storage,
to that they're able to put things out into the public domain, make these connections, put things out into the public domain that you didn't put out into the public domain, right?
Well, I mean,
That's the problem.
Facial recognition software on photographs on Facebook, it goes to recognize your friends, not you, your friends. It wants to know who your friends are.
One of the largest selling devices since post 9/11 Patriot Act has been license plate readers, and police departments around the country, most of them have license plate readers on their vehicles. So while my car being in a certain location at one time is public domain, is my trend of all the places where my license plate has been read, and that map does that count as an unconstitutional search or not? Right, or
only in California.
Right, and it varies by state because we have a largely deregulated society. So exactly that point, right? So
but the database is private. The database is private.
No, it's not.
It's not.
Well, wait, let me restate
They've
it.
been subpoenaed
It's
for.
a commercial data, it's a commercial database, and what are the limits in terms of what they can do with it?
But they're not sketched out. Most states, some states like California have said this is how long you can keep that data and what you can use it for. A lot of other states haven't, and then some of those records are being subpoenaed for use in civil cases like divorce matters or custody hearings and so forth, right? So the use of that data was, while originally intended to track, criminals and terrorists, has now expanded significantly. And I think that's the larger point, is that we don't know up front how the algorithms and the design principles will change and now pivot to other uses, right? And now red light cameras are in the same boat.
Stuff, yeah.
Or how about your DNA? Everybody's giving us that.
And one point I would make in general is that you're technically right, letter of the law, a public space, technically in the example you gave, that person's not breaking the law because you're in a public space. But it's important to remember, we don't relinquish all our rights just because we're in a public space. I can't go up to you and punch you just because you're in a public space. So
Unless
there's
you're
a
Nazi.
well, I'm not going to get into that internet meme, but there is a question of this may be a case of what is technically legal, maybe not catching up with the implications of technology. Because I think although most of us will agree that what that person's doing is not illegal, there's something a little unsavory about it. There's something almost a little violating of consent about it. In fact, certain subcultures who for various reasons want to keep what they do private, there's an ethos in a lot of subcultures of consent around pictures, that technically, no, it's not breaking any law for you to take a picture of me at this event, but it's considered extremely rude, bordering on violating consent, and leading to social ostracization from that community to take a picture without permission. So technically, no, that's not illegal. The question might be, should we revisit norms around what can or cannot be done with our personal likenesses in a public space or not, just because technology enables that to become such a public thing in a way it couldn't be in the past.
And we can do that within our own groups. I mean, a couple of years ago I had a big birthday, one with a 0 in it. And we went to a karaoke bar and we were just having a fantastic time. And one of my friends is a therapist in the sort of, mental health arena. And she basically said, look, there's a lot of snapping of pictures going on, but I'm deeply uncomfortable of having anything shared. And we just agreed amongst ourselves, if anybody's taking pictures that include somebody else, at least have the common decency to say, is it okay if I share this? And because she was very clear on, I want no pictures on social media of me attached to my name, and so as a group we took personal responsibility for what is essentially kind of an ethical dilemma.
Hand over there.
Yeah. I think people personally take their data a bit too seriously. A lot of people see themselves as the hero of their own story, and that's just the natural human thing, but the truth is your data isn't really that interesting. There's millions of stockbrokers and such, there's millions of people of various things, but
I will so disagree with you on that. I had occasion, I'm jealous, had occasion to look at scamming, romance scamming. Basically, and it's worse for men, because unless women take their clothes off, men are less likely to be attracted to normal pictures of women on Facebook. But women are attracted to men in uniform, fairly above average, good-looking guys. And I came across a whole tranche of men whose pictures had been put on social media by themselves or their friends, who were then found themselves attached to a romance scam where women thought they were communicating with that good-looking guy and they were actually communicating with some scumbag in Nigeria or something. You know what I mean? So you can't make. There are all sorts of nefarious ways in which.
What was your point that you were trying to make about people overvalue their data.
Well, I mean, Google isn't gonna find something in your search history and then slip a note onto your boss's desk. They're not going to. They have
What if
better
your
things
boss
to do.
pays Google to get information about his employees? You know, he
That's
wants to
your
know if they're
boss's
good
problem.
employees.
It's, there's a lot of ambiguity in that regard, but a lot of people tend to think that people are going to focus intensely on every little trend in their life. But the truth is that there's so much data out there that only very small streams are actually going to get decoded in like just the current year. It's going to get a bit more advanced in the coming years to like 2030, where it's going to get a lot more advanced with computing of very varied data, with people like humans being, today they're a very unpredictable thing, but by 2030 they're probably going to be more predictable than cars or things like that, for example.
They're more predictable.
I believe there
was an article recently that was saying that we already have the capability to analyze mass amounts of data that way. And from liking 6 things on Facebook, they can predict and know much more about you than you would ever dream possible.
Well, I mean,
and so you,
that's where we are today, but in 2030 and beyond that, they're going to know so much more about you from all the data collected that they're going to be able to create an exact profile, knowing exactly who you are, and actually be able
What
to
are the
replicate.
implications behind that, do you think? You say that your data is not important, that makes me uncomfortable.
It's not important now, really.
Are you saying that it's too late? Are you
I'm
saying like it
not
doesn't
saying it's too
matter
late.
because we've gone
It's
like
the march of
beyond the
progression,
pale?
that's how it goes. If you fall off the cliff.
That's what I hear when I hear
Exactly.
about how young folks, you're a little younger than I am.
That is the conventional, that's why I had the, you know, the not that you're a frog, by the way. If you're not a frog, I'm not saying that, but what I'm saying that, like, I think a lot of our narrative is around kids don't care about, and I think that's not what you mean. I really don't think that that's what you mean, that you don't care about data and privacy at all. But you're saying that it's not as interesting for other people than yourself. I think that. And so I'm definitely, you know, I know that when I'm holding this presentation, it's definitely contrary to what is the going norm. I liken it a little bit to global warming. This discussion around global warming, we could have a discussion of, well, it's not happening. Humans are not creating global warming, and you could say, okay, well, that's a fair argument. Maybe we're not. The problem is the consequences of if we're wrong. So it's more like a discussion of what are the consequences if we are actually indeed presuming what is not the case. Like if we make these general statements that young people don't care about it, so we might as well just, you know, we might as well just let AT&T sell all people's browsing data because they don't care about it anyway, and so that they can have an extra stream of revenues that person could have had instead. I think we're making some assumptions about a whole generation that might, given my observations, prove to be erroneously in the future. At least, you know, but yeah.
I also just point out everyone that we are sitting about 5 minutes left, so you know, keep your comments short and let's start trying to wrap things up. Don't mean this is a great discussion, just we have to be out by 9. So anyway.
And if you want to follow it up, we're going to.
Yeah, we're gonna go to Firehouse down the street, so you can continue there.
Let me ask real quick. If, let's say the pendulum is swinging, you know, this direction towards, you know, ubiquitous use of data, et cetera, and people are being profiled more and more aggressively, profiles are becoming more accurate, people are being influenced. Don't you think that at some point, you know, society at large is going to say, look, we've had enough of this usage, and they're going to, you know, demand that better data privacy or, you know, some sort of laws or controls are put in place for that, you know, for the use of that data or even for the collection of it?
That's essentially what I think. Precisely that, you know, we're stretching that pendulum very far to one side, and I think we can start waiting for that pendulum to be driven back. And whether, you know, and I think maybe since generational change is such a massive shift of zeitgeist, I mean, there are many factors that can cause that to happen. It might actually be boomers, in nursing homes saying that, hey, I want HIPAA to start looking into this, So it doesn't necessarily have to start with the youngest generation, but typically what we see is like when a new generation comes of age, we see this massive new zeitgeist shifting and penetrating the value system. Even both behaviors and values are sometimes seeping upward from a younger generation. So that's why I wanted to kind of postulate that there's a possibility that this generation will be that force that pushes the pendulum to go back, and for us to be a little bit more just more aware and maybe demand some more laws or demand more from the companies that we interact with.
To some extent, that's already happening, right? Like GDPR is a huge step, right? Companies can be fined 4% of their global revenue for violating their privacy policies, right? And that's a pretty steep fine for a lot of companies. And it's 4% or $20,000, whichever one is higher, right? So per incident, and so that's a pretty big shift in terms of the regulatory power around this. I would hope what you're saying means that other countries like ours will adopt similar mechanisms, and there's moves in California
But that's specific to
will do that.
B2B, right?
No.
Not personal.
No, that's personal. I mean, it's still regulated by the data protection authorities, which are in Europe are quasi-government consumer authorities.
All right, well, I think we're going to wrap it up here. So thank you very much, Anne. Thank you all for coming out. We have a lot of new faces tonight, so we hope you guys like what you saw here, and if you care about these issues and want to get involved in this community here, we hope you keep coming out and being involved in the ways you want to. And as I alluded to, we're going to be adjourning to Firehouse to have events for about an hour and continue these discussions. So anybody who wants to come is welcome to join us. Thank you all.
Thanks for hosting this.
Oh, pleasure. Always hope to see you back.
I'm not, I'm gonna go, because I'm gonna be able to go tomorrow. Are you gonna be able to go?
Well, there.
Thank you very much. It was a delightful discussion. I appreciate it. Oh yeah, join us, absolutely. It's on Brazos, like walk towards 6th Street. It's like if we're on 7th Brazos. If you go south on Brazos towards 6th Street, it's on your left. But it's like less than a block. Yeah, you can follow us.
Yes. Yeah, no, I'm done with those areas. That's why, I didn't really get very deep in each domain because I try to drop parallels with how they are in other domains.
When you weren't speaking, I was just a futurist.
Yeah.
You weren't speaking, somebody else was speaking, maybe Carrie today, but I was in a conversation with you afterwards and you had mentioned it.
Okay, yes, yeah, I sometimes miss that, but we'll finish this up, yeah, I'm very involved in that, so, yeah. So we're actually gonna start meeting here. I'm in Milwaukee, pretty fall, maybe not this year, but we're gonna get to it, like, all of my.
Yeah.
What do you think?
In a way where
And they didn't.
Charity.
It's all the stuff they're on film with that. And
Nothing on social media.
in general, that that's your agenda. But the stuff that we're trying to.
I don't believe the cell phone search passed.
It did not, but only because
Did you see?
it was killed, trust me, that was like my baby.
And brain hacking. Very interesting, and
Part of the Mother's Day massacre.
it's about.
So it was all set to pass.
Oh, we're always looking for speakers. The topic range is broad. I mean, obviously, I guess I would say talks that are in the realm of technology, the intersection of technology, law, society, and almost anything in that intersection is fair game. We're very interested in the ways that
So we got really lucky.
technology
But
involves
that bill
political and social
I think
in society that's sort of
it
in-house, but if you can tie it to that, it's not talking.
Because again, it did pass.
Like,
Yeah, I mean, individually, the conference.
No, it's more applications.
So we are
archiving
because when we spoke with
and we've
them,
done even like neuroscience talks, like it really drives me to deal. We have definitely tech companies run as cooperatives last month. There's a lot of things. So I mean, yeah, really potentially interesting topic.
it just wanted to show you.
Oh, yeah, no, we would love to talk about it. We are scheduled for July.
So that was
We basically do about one talk a month. We occasionally have other talks, to you all.
Okay, so I thought I saw you.
About 1 month, but July's looking up right now. August, maybe we're done with that. I'm also pretty sure September's broken. I'm sorry, get back to me, like, yeah, I can,
Yeah, but I can't say right now. I know it's really close. It's like, you know, it's like a hospital.
School places.
Yeah, so you're gonna, I'm gonna go to Elon Heavens, because you go check into the youth hostel, right? And then you slide a bookshelf back.
Welch, WLCH.
It's right around.
At
Different Brazos, maybe?
EFF-Austin, no dash, just EFF-Austin.
Yeah, so I mean, it's really right around here.
And just email me there and we can coordinate something.
Firehouse Mountain. I'll send you. You can also.
Is it right around here? What's the
Yeah,
address?
I remember.
Six in Brazos.
Here.
Yeah.
We have
Modern hostel accommodations
Happy
and
to
all.
join
That's
that.
it.
Oh, I mean, we're always.
Yeah, I'm gonna go there for
The
about
site is as big, we're gonna join a bit with Roadrunners.
Yeah, let's go get a beer and.
So absolutely,
I'd love to.
I know people might have questions.
Yeah,
and it's not like-
it's a way to track us in general,
Okay.
also, there's our
No, it's great.
website,
I'd
or
love
our
to.
meetups, just, yeah,
It's one of these things
we
where-
tend to announce when we have
Yeah,
things
so
go
if we
on,
can
just
get
email
them.
to me.
Thank you.
Care about it.
Awesome.
What is
Then-
the decision?
Just myself.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
the last
yeah.
was the other one, the one I'm part of OWASP.
I hear ya.
Security project.
Oh,
Yeah, we have a big job.
Oh, yeah, we're gonna go head up the firehouse for a little bit. This is a new thing we're doing this month, we were kinda like, we need to build a little more social cohesion and not just have it talks. Well, you're welcome to join us, if you're probably joining us, you know.
It is Monday, right?
It is Monday, you
Yeah,
know.
lots of the week left to work. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, a number of us are going over there, you're welcome to join
let's
us.
go.
Alright,
I'm
awesome.
nervous, I'm supporting Right Austin right now. I was offered a ride home.
Oh, wow.
But I said, no, I'm gonna support Right Austin.
Take care, have a good night.
Oh, okay, so because it's 24 hours.
I will sell